Hi, friends, and welcome to Season 3 of the School Librarian Learning Network podcast. I'm Steve Tatro, often known as Dr. T Loves Books, and I love talking about all things related to school libraries. I'm an old dog who's always trying to learn new tricks. That's why at each episode of the SLLN podcast, I'll chat with a school librarian about a lesson, program, or activity they love. Hopefully, this can be a place for school librarians to get ideas and find new ways to engage with their students and staff. Speaking of which, I'd love to hear about what you and your friends are doing in your school library. Email me at drtlovesbooks@gmail.com. That's drtlovesbooks@gmail.com to tell me about what you're doing, offer feedback about the SLLN podcast, or to request a podcast sticker. As Amy Herman likes to say, being a guest on a podcast is a great way to show your admins you are engaged in meaningful professional development and leadership in the profession. So drop me a line and let's chat. That being said, the opinions and ideas shared in this podcast by myself and my guests are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. I just like to geek out about school libraries. So without further ado, let's get to this week's episode. Hey everybody, we're back. I've got a new friend. I'm very excited, talking about a topic that I personally love, so I'm very excited to get into this. But as usual, I jumped too far ahead. So let me back up and say, welcome, Alexa. So glad you can be here. Why don't you take a second, tell folks who you are, where you're at, and what you do.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexa Dumas. I am the middle school librarian for the Plattsburgh City School District in Plattsburgh, New York. I serve around 400 students in grades 6 through 8. I have a very diverse population of students, and we're located very close to the Canadian border by Quebec. So I serve lots of different students who are coming to Northern New York from all different places. I'm also a public librarian at a rural public library in the Adirondack Mountains in upstate New York. So when I'm not at school, I'm the Saturday librarian, and I also work at my public library over the summer too.
That's
I run
awesome.
New York State has a really cool program where once you get your school librarianship teaching certification, you apply to become a public librarian through the New York State Library. So the New York State Education Department runs alongside the New York State Library. So you just send them your information and pay $5. So I'm certified both school and public library.
That's cool.
So I run a lot of different programs for my school and for my public library. So I serve patrons of all ages 6 days a week.
That's awesome. Man.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Courtney Pentland, but she has said in the past that she libraries all the time, and you clearly embody librarying all the time. I love it. That's awesome. Man. So,
I definitely felt it this week, especially.
Yeah. A bit of a long one.
A lot of people are like, wait, so you work on Saturday? I'm like, yes, I work Saturdays too. But the public library I work at is really awesome. My director was my dad's childhood best friend. We're neighbors. We live on the same street. And my patrons are mostly my 2 cousins who come to bother me. They're in their late 20s, early 30s. So they're just hanging out with me on a Saturday. And it's a great gig to have.
That sounds awesome.
Outside of school. Yeah.
How did you end up in librarianship in the first place?
So I have a very unique library story. A lot of librarians who become librarians, usually it's their second career. For me, I've known I wanted to be a librarian since I was 17.
Okay.
I'm a third generation educator. So my parents are both educators. My dad was a 30-year career English educator, and my mom's a reading specialist. So books have been in my sphere my entire life. And on my dad's side, my grandmother was an art teacher and my grandfather was a physical education teacher. So teachers are around us. And I thought when I was a sophomore in high school, I wanted to be an English teacher. But I went to a rural high school and I only had 2 English teachers. One was my dad and one was Miss Lawson, my other English teacher. And she told me that I should not be like my dad and go do something else. So I didn't really know what to do. And my mom suggested that I become a school librarian. And I was like, no, I'm not being a teacher. Everyone's a teacher. I'm not going to do that. And so I set my heart on going into public librarianship. So I started my undergrad in English And during winter break, I started substituting at school because that's just what you do in my area. And then I was like, okay, kids are really not that bad. So I got back on the school library track. I graduated with my bachelor's in English, and then I did my master's online through the University at Buffalo. And I actually worked as a public librarian during that time in undergrad. So I did that for about a year, and then I got my first teaching job at 21 in May 2024, and then that's the position I still have today.
Amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, congrats on your position.
Thank
That's
you.
great, man. Awesome, man. I love that you've got this. That is an awesome origin story for a school librarian. That's really the greatest.
I don't know many school librarians, but I definitely realized after working at the public library, that space was not for me. I will do it. I do it in the summers and on my off days, but definitely school is where I belong. And I was very apprehensive about that at first. I begrudgingly agreed with my mother, but school is where I belong. And my sister, I only have one sister, she's in school to be a phys ed teacher. So it truly is our family's career.
It is in the genes, man.
Yes.
So as the public librarian in your area, do you see a lot of your students?
No, I actually live an hour away from where I teach.
Oh, okay.
So I commute an hour one way to school every day.
Wow.
So I see I see the people that I live around at the public library, but my school kids are totally separate.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it's a totally separate world too. So where I live in the Adirondacks is very rural, very small town mindset. And then Plattsburgh is our biggest city in our area.
Okay.
We have we have a community college and a university there. So it's bigger. There's way more people, way more things happening. So it's two different worlds going back and forth.
Gotcha. Okay. Man. Well, I mean, I love that you were here to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is graphic novels, because they are the greatest. Before we get into sort of the details, I'm kind of curious, like, where did your ideas for this kind of come from? Like, because correct me if I'm wrong, this is a presentation that you give to your staff, right?
Yeah. So I have been reading graphic novels for a majority of my life. My first graphic novel, which I have with me, is Smile by Raina Telgemeier.
Great one.
I bought it at the book fair when I was in 6th grade, and I really felt seen through Raina's artwork. Raina, if you know the book, Raina gets her teeth knocked in after falling and hitting her face on a curb. And I had really messed up teeth as a kid, so I went through the troubles of having braces and, not feeling confident in yourself. And I saw myself in this book. And it is so beat up from years and years of just rereading it. And so I loved her novels. And I also really loved illustrated novels. Like Brian Selznick is one of my favorite authors as well. And just an appreciation for both art and literature is something that has been deeply ingrained in my life from my art teacher grandmother and my two parents who love literature as well. So the balance of art and literature has been something that's really important to me. And also, when I went to college, one of my professors, Dr. Tracy Guzio at Plattsburgh State University, she taught a lot of graphic novels in her multi-ethnic American literature class and her trauma literature class. So it was a way to see like how different people function in the world and what they're carrying with them. And so I didn't really consider that until I went to college. Like, again, when I was a younger reader, I just enjoyed them, but I didn't see the power of graphic novels until I was an undergraduate. And then when I entered the public library space is when I really was like, oh my gosh, graphic novels are the coolest thing we could possibly have in our schools and libraries, and more people need to know about this.
Absolutely.
So
man,
the reason
I'm on the same page there.
The reason I decided to do this presentation is the, common mindset of graphic novels aren't real reading. And I just needed to nip that in the bud and dispel those common myths that people might have.
Absolutely.
And my presentation really went into depth on how to really read graphic novels and all the different benefits for students. And we can get into that a little bit later too.
Yeah, no, I love that you are really foregrounding the importance of visual literacy for our students, because so often we focus on literacy as letters and words and sentences, and we forget that there's a whole other component when, even on the written page, a lot of authors use the organization of the page, or the chapter, introduction will have some sort of an illustration or a way that the type font is set. And so all of that plays into our understanding. And I think graphic novels do such an excellent job of putting that right in front of us. And like you said, being able to see yourself, not just imagine yourself like you might with words, but to literally sort of see yourself in a graphic novel can be a really powerful thing for our students. So I love that you're bringing this right to the teachers to say, look, we need this. Our kids need this.
And what's really cool about our sequential art is not only the multimodal text with both the art and, the text, is the fact that kids aren't being taught how to read graphic novels. They figure it out themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I was never taught how to read a graphic novel. I had to use my skills as a novel reader to read graphic novels. So many adults, again, have that graphic novels are bad, graphic novels are not real reading mentality. So no one's actually sitting down and teaching kids how to read these books. And then when they progress to reading our other types of sequential art, like manga, no one is sitting down and teaching these kids how to read it. So they're actually using a lot of skills that they need to teach themselves rather than someone else helping them through it.
It's great decoding skills. And it's so true. I had read Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics maybe like 10 years ago or so. And I had been a lifelong comic book reader, graphic novel reader, and I had never really put together how much processing goes on in order to understand what you're seeing in sequential art, which is what it's sometimes called instead of graphic novels or comics, because the art goes in a sequence and therefore, you decode the sequence. But you're absolutely right. And it's so, you're saying it, and I don't know that it ever really clicked for me, but the fact that pretty much all of our students have to work it out on their own, and we just assume that they know how to do it, which is not necessarily the case, especially with something like manga, especially for our students in Western society that don't necessarily see manga on a regular basis. Because not too long ago, I had a couple of students pick up a couple of manga out of our library, and they started looking through it, and they were like, I don't understand what's going on, because they were reading it in what they think of as the traditional way. And I was like, actually, it's all backwards from what you think of as the regular way. And so we've got to recome at that. And it kind of blew their minds a little bit that there's other ways of looking at stuff. And that in and of itself, I think, is incredibly important. But anyway, I could go on about this for hours, and I'm going to get past all that. I'm going to say it's awesome that you are doing this for your kids and that you're bringing this lesson to your teachers. And so where did you kind of give this to your teachers? Was it like a faculty day? Was it an elective thing that they came in? How did that kind of work?
So this past week is when I gave the presentation. So on March 25th, we had what we call a superintendent conference day in my district. We have 5 buildings, 3 elementaries, 1 middle, 1 high school.
Okay.
And the teachers can pick different sessions to attend. And every year I submit something. Last year I talked about the best diverse books K-12. And this year I was like on my high horse. I'm like, okay, graphic novels is what we're talking about. And I'm also presenting on graphic novels at my state conference in May.
Awesome.
But the difference between talking about graphic novels to librarians is they're already on board. I don't need to convince them about anything. So they get the best books talk. My faculty in my district need to learn why graphic novels rule and are the best.
Love it. Love it.
And so something else that I described in my presentation as well is the different forms of sequential art. So we have comic books, which are typical flimsy magazine, serialized. What we think of comic books as, like our Superman, our Spider-Man, our Captain America, those are our typical comic books. And then we have our graphic novels, which are in-the-depth, lengthy texts that are similar to our regular fiction novels. They're just told with panels and not with sentences. And then manga is our Japanese style, which we read from right to left and not left to right. And something else that's interesting too that I was thinking about as you were talking about teaching people how to read sequential art is I've read over 500 graphic novels at this point, and there's a series that I really love, Something is Killing the Children, which is an adult comic series. And there are panels that actually span the 2-page spread. So I had to train my brain to not read left to right on one singular page, but read left to right across 2 whole pages. And that even took me time to get used to. So no one's teaching kids how to do this.
Absolutely. There's a lot of visual cueing that goes on in different kinds of comic books, graphic novels, whatever the format is, because there are, like you said, stuff that spans pages. Sometimes you've got like a full page spread. Sometimes text bubbles are the things that lead you, or thought bubbles lead you from one section to another. And you've really got to pay attention to so many cues to fully grasp what's going on and how the different pieces go together. So many elements to this that are so wonderful for our students' brain development, because it really forces them to pay attention in a way that they may not pay attention to words on a page. Because words on a page, they're there. Like, they don't squeal around. They don't cross pages. Like, they are in columns set in very specific patterns. And this really forces them to be a little more conscious and aware of the arrangement of everything on the page and kind of take in the whole so that they can figure out what the parts are.
And not only that too, but as we jump from panel to panel, sometimes things are not explained panel to panel. So the gutter, which is the white space, sometimes you need to guess what's happening in between each sequence in the gutter space that the author or illustrator is not telling you. So it's a lot of imagination. It's also a lot of
inference.
A lot of inference, but it's also reading a lot of body language, facial movement, how frames are set up. So if something is happening in I do a lot of middle grade graphic novels because I'm in middle school, and that's kind of my hot spot. A lot of times when they're children's graphic novels, you'll see an imagination bubble from the main character, and you can tell it's not the thought bubble, it's the panel is the imagination, and it's in a cloud, and you have to be able to figure that out. Or if it's happening in a character's head, there might be a panel where you see their face, and then the best example I could think of is from Halfway There by Christine Mari. It's a graphic novel about Christine's journey figuring out her Japanese American identity, and she's in Japan and people are talking in Japanese and she can't understand them, and she responds wrong to whatever they were talking about, and you could see embarrassment on her face, and then half of her head opens up to her inside thought, and her inside thought is saying, "You idiot." And you as the reader have to realize that that isn't actually happening, and that it's her inside thought popping out to yell at herself, essentially. So it's a lot of reading faces, reading the setting. And there's a lot of different stylistic features and structural features that I love to see in graphic novels. My favorite is definitely when we talk about foreign language in graphic novels, how that is used, because there's so many different stylistic choices. But authors and illustrators have a lot of creative space to storytell, and a lot of them take it and run with it. And the reader has to figure out a lot of things on their own.
Yeah. Well, and even just, I mean, you're talking about thought bubbles and thoughts and dialogue. Even those, the shapes of speech bubbles, the shapes of thought bubbles can by themselves indicate a lot of tone. They can indicate a lot of the atmosphere of what's going on in the story. Like, every single visual element on the page is giving you some kind of information. And the very clever authors and illustrators take advantage of that in such amazing ways. And like you said, so much of it is students figuring out on their own without any sort of instruction. And yet we very carefully and explicitly teach them how to read a book. We don't often very carefully explicitly teach them how to look at sequential art in this way, or look at any kind of art in this way. So I love that you're bringing this to your teachers. And like you said, school librarians, I think 99.9% of the people listening to our episode are going to be like, yes, of course, comic books, of course, graphic novels, of course, manga, this is important stuff. But I love that you went to the teachers, because like you said, a lot of times there's resistance from the teacher side of things. And as a longtime English teacher, I get it. Like, there's this idea that we've got to be accountable. We've got to push the kids. They've got to be really working hard, and graphic novels don't make them work hard, which is BS. Like, I get the concept. They can read it too fast. And I'm like, is that a problem that they are ripping through a book real fast? Like, why are we upset about that? And one of the main things English teachers try and teach is inference. And there's so much, like 90% of what they're doing, not 90%. There's a whole lot of what they're doing when they read a graphic novel that is inference based on what they're seeing. So there's that disconnect, I think. And so I love that you're going to the teachers with this.
I also think if you think about it in this type of perspective too, is film study. Film study and graphic novels are very similar. A lot of the definitions for things are very similar, like shots. There's a close-up, there's a mid-shot, and then there's a long shot. So there's different, like we see someone's emotions when it's a close-up. When it's a mid-shot, we see their body language, and it's a long shot, it's an establishing shot, so we can see the setting. So if an English teacher is teaching film studies, you could do the same with a graphic novel. It's not any different. It's just the difference between text on a page and what you can visually see in front of you. And we're in a visual culture. We see a lot of things. So why not show students, like my argument is like, why not show them history? Why not show them science through panels? And so they can really have these really maybe complex ideas concrete in their brains after seeing them through a graphic novel.
Absolutely. Man, I could not be more on board with what you are saying right now. This is the best. So you had put together this amazing presentation. Do you want to maybe hit some of the highlights so that folks know? Because folks, this is going to be in the show notes, and you're going to want to take advantage, and you're going to want to share it with your staff, and you're going to want to lay it out like Alexa does, because this is great. Let's just maybe hit some of the main points so folks are going to know, like, oh yeah, this is why we need to really bring this to our teachers.
Sure. So luckily, when I went to go put this presentation together very much at the last minute, because that's how I roll, Canva already had a presentation about stylistic and structure features. So most of the definitions are straight from Canva, and I really liked what they had to say. So I just threw in some of my own examples. Some of the biggest points that I hit with my teachers were the stylistic features. So how an artist may go about describing certain things. Like, yes, we could talk about like panels and gutters and speech bubbles, but those are some things that people already kind of know about. Like, yes, a jagged speech bubble is someone who's angry. A speech bubble with like maybe dashes around the bubble is whispering. Like, most people kind of already know that. Or like, the bigger the text, the louder the speech actually is, or the smaller the text, the smaller the speech is. But I really wanted to hit on stylistic features that authors and illustrators might use to really convey a lot of the feeling and emotion, because the subtitle of my presentation is building like culturally responsive students. And I'm really trying to push the like, seeing people do things is empathetic. It will also help students, read people better, function more in their world better. We want them to be global citizens, well-rounded people, and graphic novels are the way to do that.
Absolutely.
One of the points that I also hit on too is accessibility.
Yes.
A lot of graphic novel text is all capitalized, and the fonts that they use usually help students who might have reading difficulties, specifically students like with dyslexia. If some student has difficulty connecting words on the page to something in real life through a novel, graphic novels can actually help them connect words with actions better because they can see it in the book that they're reading. And again, accessibility and text. There's a graphic novel called Mixed Up by Cami Garcia, where the font is actually Open Dyslexic, which is the dyslexic font that helps round out some of the commonly confused letters. And the book is about a girl with dyslexia. So it's awareness, accessibility, all kind of thrown into one.
Oh, I love that. I hadn't heard of that.
Yeah, it's really great. One of my teachers who works in my building who came to my presentation, she's in an autism classroom, and she brought up that a lot of graphic novels are actually really great for students who may not be able to see people's emotions and how different actions affect other people. So it helps in the reteaching of how you as a person affects other people around you. Yes. So some students may not understand that hitting hurts people. And so if you have a graphic novel that shows it in a panel, then it can help solidify that into understanding for a student.
I
And
imagine too, with that sort of in that same vein, the facial expressions and emotions that sometimes some students have trouble reading a facial expression in real life. Here is an example that they can refer back to and is probably supported with additional maybe color elements or text elements to clarify what's going on.
Yeah, and that's usually called emanata. So it's like the feelings we like emote. So it's usually like sparkles or the pain lines we think of, or like sweat, or all these different action lines. That's emanata. And that's what we usually attribute to facial expressions, emotions in graphic novels. And again, no one is teaching these kids how to read those cues. They have to figure it out themselves. And that's the decoding that I think is really awesome. We
Yeah,
also have cool
absolutely.
things like onomatopoeia, where we physically see action words coming at us. One of my favorite panels is from Chickenpox by Remy Lay, and it is a graphic novel about this group of siblings who get chickenpox. And there's one panel where she's just the main character is voraciously scratching herself, and you can see how in pain she is. Her face is red, the background is red, and it just says scratch, 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 scratch. And the text itself even has these pointed, jagged features. So it really hits home how painful chickenpox is. I've never had chickenpox because I'm 23 years old and I was born when the vaccine came out. But if you don't know how chickenpox feels, that's a great way to show you. Or from El Defo by CC Bell, there's a panel where, so CC has these hearing aids that connect to a microphone that her teacher wears, and the teacher drops the microphone on the floor, and the panel says kaboom, and it is in this jagged text box, and it's all red, and the part of the jagged text box are literally falling on the floor, and it looks like glass shards. So you as the reader are like, oh my God, ow. But we don't actually experience the pain that Cece probably felt in that moment, but we can empathize with her.
Yeah,
or when someone's
absolutely.
crying or in pain, we can empathize with how they are feeling.
Yeah. And you had mentioned when we started that you have a pretty diverse population, and I'm kind of curious, are you at some point do you also tie in ELL to the wonder that is graphic novels? Because again, talk about accessibility, even for folks with some who may have a language difficulty, this can be a way in for them.
Yeah, that's something I talked about with my teachers. I don't have instructional periods in my schedule. I run a flexible schedule, so I'm just pushing. And most of my lessons are research-based, not necessarily about literature. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this graphic novel workshop with my teachers.
Yeah.
But I did talk about how language is something that is very vital to graphic novels, even when things are left unsaid. So if you're coming into a new culture that you might not understand, having graphic novels accessible is something that's really important for our English language learners. And again, it ties words with actions. So someone who might be learning English might not totally understand the word that is connected to the action, but they can see it happening and then over time develop those language skills.
Right.
So I have a Spanish-speaking population, so I have over 50 books for them. I have about 15 graphic novels, but I make sure to purchase ones that I have in English as well. So if they needed to, they could read them together. So they could read the Spanish version and the English version and really work on those language building skills.
That's awesome. That's a great idea too, having both versions. Because I think a lot of time when I think about, I've got to make sure I'm supporting my ELL students, I think about make sure they have stuff in their language, but I don't always necessarily pair that. But that's a good point. Learning things, always learning things. I love it. Awesome. So sorry, I interrupted. You were talking about the importance of so many of the image features and how students are able to decode that and helping your teachers understand the importance of this. So where do you sort of take them from there?
So as I progress the presentation, I give them book recommendations based off of their content area. I luckily got a list of who was coming to my presentation before, like a week beforehand. And again, I didn't start my presentation until 2 days before. So I had a lot of secondary teachers who signed up. So my presentation was already kind of geared towards secondary more than primary, only because there's a lot of great like beginning to read graphic novels, but I'm not as in touch with them because that's not the patrons that I usually serve in my middle school. So I focus more on novel adaptations and then books for ELA classrooms, science, social studies. I even hit on math, which is actually very difficult to find.
Yes.
And then I also did selections with memoir and biography, social emotional learning, and then I gave my favorites too. So
Love it.
I was really...
Folks, if you're not already, make sure you dive into the show notes and check this out because she's got book talks by subject. You know you need math graphic novels. You know I know I do. So definitely check that out.
And again, I really wanted to show teachers that there is space for curriculum engagement with graphic novels, as well as social and emotional learning. Another fun fact about me is that very soon I will be going back to school to get my second master's in children's literature.
Ooh.
And a passion of mine is grief and trauma narratives in children's lit. So social emotional learning books are very up my alley. So trying to explain to teachers that there are books for every type of kid and every type of life experience, especially students who are impoverished, students who have lost a loved one, students who have a lot of different things going on at home that you might not understand, students who are anxious, students who may have disabilities that they're unaware that are even happening in their bodies, especially in middle school, because we have lots of changes happening. Friendships, relationships, all that stuff can be found in graphic novels. So I really wanted to hit home with that. And I had a lot of social studies teachers, so I was really trying to get people to read history comics because I think those are really cool.
Yes. And I mean, so much of the history curriculum, there's so many interesting things that have happened in history. But my experience with history when I was a student was always like, here are dry dates to remember and dry names to remember that go with those dates. And like, none of it really stuck. Like the only thing that I can recall from middle school, high school history is 1066 was the Battle of Hastings because it got drummed into my head about 1 billion times. What was it? I don't know. But there's so many great graphic novels now that deal with like nonfiction topics that absolutely fit into curriculum in not just comic books aren't just for ELA classes. It's the best. There's so many great things out there. I'm sure you know the Nathan Hale's Hazardous Tales series. Love them. Can't keep them on the shelf. My middle school students, I had a kid come in on a Monday and by Friday he had read through literally every single one that we had, all dozen of them, gone and brought back. It's the best.
And there's also really great nonfiction graphic novels that are even more engaging than just comic books. So Kate Mesner used to teach at my school. We're friends, and she did the History Smashers series. So there's comic panels, there are photos, there are documents and actual text. So you're engaging with all these different types of learning, and it makes things more exciting rather than just getting the typical lecture.
Yes, absolutely.
And another thing that I talked about with my teachers after I gave the book recommendations was, okay, how can you use comics in your classroom when you have students in front of you? Not just reading comics, but how do they engage with art? So I talked about using comic panels as assessment. So as a formative or summative assessment, show what you know, show what you learned, use a 6-panel page, use a 4-panel page, just write a quick comic on a definition of a word. My social studies teacher growing up had us write the definition of a word that we had to learn for vocabulary. So it would be like, I don't know, war, define war, and then draw a picture of war. And then it would engage that active part of your brain where you need to really visualize things. So I kind of talked about having 1-pagers as an assessment. Our district really pushes project-based learning. So I talked about instead of having kids give a 5-slide presentation, have them make a comic, have them make a graphic novel about the topic that you are talking about. It still engages them with research and learning and inquiry, but the method of presenting information is just different. And it's a really fun way to distribute it too. And then my last lesson idea was to do a zine. So I really like zines. I used to run a zine club with middle schoolers back when I worked at the public library. So I know how to make zines. I love zines. They're super fun. And just trying to show teachers that kids can tell you things in 8 panels. It doesn't
Yes.
have to be this long, strenuous project. You can get them to do what you want in this 8-panel booklet, and they can distribute it to their friends, and it's really fun. And then you can get them to make zines about whatever they want. So I actually do teach one instructional class. It's called reading, and it's for our 6th graders. It's a pretty standard class. You read independently for 20 minutes, and then I read to them for 20 minutes.
Oh, that's fun.
Really fun. And
Yeah.
around the Youth Media Awards, I do a Caldecott and a Newbery project where you just learn about the different awards. And last year with my class, I had some really creative kids. So we did Caldecott zines. So I had them pick a Caldecott winner, and it was just all about this title. And then I told them, okay, on the first panel, I want to know the author and the illustrator. The second panel, I want to know the characters. Then I want to know the setting. And then until you get to the last panel, you get to put your own review, and I want it colored, and I want you to draw the characters in the books. And they loved it.
Yeah.
So there's other ways to engage students with comics. You just have to be creative in the output that you want and the delivery in which you, like, what type of comic fits the project you have in front of you.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about a picture is worth 1,000 words, and instead of having a kid write 1,000 words, have them draw a picture. Like, so much easier to assess, so much more fun for us to take in, so much more creativity on their side to be able to capture their thought in an image, probably with words. So we're still getting language development, but we're also getting visual literacy development. There's so many great elements to that. Boy, oh, I love that. That's so cool. Huh. Man, well, this is awesome that you brought this to your teachers. And hopefully, I mean, I think they would be insane if they were not having you push into their classes to talk about this with the students as well. Because like you said, nobody teaches them a lot of this stuff. And some students, I think, are, as much as they love graphic novels and comics, some students, I think, are reluctant because I don't know that they always get it. And, you know, maybe they haven't figured out those decoding skills that other kids have figured out on their own. So there's an opportunity, I think, to talk to the students about this and help them kind of understand, oh yeah, there are a lot of elements that go into this. And if you're not quite getting it, that's okay. Let's talk through like how this works. And the ones who do get it, great. Now you've got an in-class expert. And what's better than making the kid the expert? So many possibilities and opportunities with this to really engage our students and give them a different kind of literacy and a different kind of agency. So I love that. Oh, boy.
Yeah, and my middle schoolers are no stranger to graphic novels. I ran some stats for this presentation in an article I had to write, and I have over 2,000 comics titles from graphic novels, manga, and comic books. I was lucky, and the librarian before me actually did purchase a lot of titles, but
That's
I purchase
awesome.
a lot of titles too because I love graphic novels. And sometimes I tell my kids, those graphic novels are actually for me, and then they'll be for you. But I have over 3,000 comic circulations so far this school year, opposed to last year I had about 1,200, even
That's
though
amazing.
nothing has really changed. I think I just promote them better. I also genrefied my graphic novel collection this year to make it more accessible for my students because I was finding I want the romance, I want the sports. And I was like, okay, fine, I'll genreify this. And I think that's really helped my circulation too. But again, kids are no strangers to comics. So most kids that you find, and I told this to my teachers, will know who Dogman is. They'll be familiar with Raina Telgemeyer's books. They'll be familiar with all of these comic titles, even if they haven't actually read it themselves. So it's bleeding into our popular culture and our reading culture. And we need to embrace it and celebrate it and not limit what our kids can and can't read. Because again, they're visually engaging with art, which is fantastic. This is what we need more of, especially, as the rise of AI, slop is coming into the forefront. We really need to bolster our artists, and we also have to engage our readers any way we can so we create that lifelong skill. Absolutely. So if it's with a graphic novel that hooks them, then that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
And again, I'm the biggest comics reader probably in my school, not my kids. So I am the first soldier on the battlefield to go to war about this topic. So
I mean, your circulation is amazing. I mean, we've got 450 students, and our circulation, I think, just hit 1850 for the year last week, at the end of this past week. So that you are at 3,000 for the year is just unbelievable. That's so great. That's so great for you and your students. Boy, I hope your teachers are realizing too. Did you share that stat with your staff when you were talking about this?
I did. And I also, in my slideshow, which is linked in the description, I have a photo of my collection. So you'll see how many books I have to offer. And again, that's and I separated different forms. So I have my graphic novels are organized by genre. Then I have my manga. And I did genreify the books themselves, but my manga readers, I asked them, I was like, so can I start moving these around? And they were like, no, do not touch them. So the books are genreified, but they're shelved by author's last name.
Okay.
I have a separate comic section for just the comic books because I found my manga readers are actually comic book readers. So they're all in the same area. And then I have a graphic nonfiction section that's split between graphic, memoir, and then regular graphic nonfiction by the Dewey number.
Gotcha. I've got my nonfiction graphics kind of mixed in just wherever they go in the nonfiction section, but I'm kind of going back and forth. I might pull them out. It's one of those things that I want the students to have that serendipity of I'm looking for something about this and, oh, here's a graphic novel about it. But I don't know. It's one of those things. But it's interesting that your manga readers are also comic book readers, because I feel like there should be more crossover there. And yet it seems like for my manga readers, they tend to be manga readers, and that's it. Like, that is what we were looking at. So that's great.
See, I thought the same thing too, but I slowly realized after observing my students for a year that they're just kind of in it for the action. And so comic books are full of action, and so are most manga books. So I was like, okay, if I put them together, then every kid that likes action will have their space.
Gotcha.
And then my other manga readers are just the cutie romance manga readers. So they find what they need to find, and then they move on.
Yeah. Man, well, that's awesome. And I love that usually when I have guests on, they talk about things they've done with students to educate their students, or things they've done with the students to engage their students. And while you are doing that, your main goal was to educate your teachers. And I think it's so important that as school librarians, we think about the fact that we're not just teaching students, we're also teaching teachers. We're teaching the staff, we're teaching the administrators. Because if you didn't have administrators sit in on this, I hope in the future you do, because they need to hear it too, that this is a very important part of a collection. Because it is, the appeal is so broad. And whatever part of the school you're in, whether you're an administrator, a teacher, a librarian, we all want the kids to read more. And if this is a way to get them to read more, why are we not doing it? So I love that you're bringing this right to the staff. That's great.
Yeah. And my district really wants to push a culture of reading too. So again, me being on the front lines of this battle, I think allows students to feel more at home and free in the library space, because they know I care so deeply about their access to all books, but their access to graphic novels especially. I engage, like when we did our graphic novel genreification, I had students help me with that process. So very hands-on with collection development with my students. And they also trust me in purchasing. When I do like a big order in the fall and then a big order in the spring. And when the new books came in, they were all like, wow, Miss Dumas, you like really picked great books. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of have a master's degree in this and it's my job. I get paid to do this. And so they were surprised I picked good books for them. But I also, say I'm also a comics reader. I'm also a graphic novels reader. So these are books that are interesting to me as a reader. So I would not buy you books that would not sound interesting at all.
Yeah.
And so that kind of engages in a conversation with my students on how we select books and that whole process. And I also discuss that with teachers too. And it gave a better insight to the role of the librarian. So that's was cool engagement.
Too. Yeah, absolutely. That's great advocacy for the position. And I think too, it's important to help our staff understand that there are so many different gradations or levels, or however you want to look at it, of graphic novels and comics. Like, there's stuff that is easier and there's stuff that is harder. Like, Dogman may be easier. It's got fewer panels, it's got fewer pages, it's got fewer words. That's fine. But there's also some really deep, thoughtful, insightful graphic novels and comics. There's a great one by Sean Tan called The Arrival. It has 0 words in it, and it is amazing. I actually made it part of our curriculum a couple of years back for the English teachers because even though it doesn't have words, it requires so much thought and concentration and focus and consideration of how is this telling the story, because it's about a person coming to a new land and trying to fit in with one of our units on current events and topics and people moving from place to place. And it hurts my heart a little bit that more people haven't embraced it as part of the curriculum because they see it as this is a quick read that the kids tear through. And I'm like, that's not necessarily bad, but also maybe encourage them to slow down, maybe go through it with them and show them like each page has so much detail and there's so much thought that went into it. And why is it this way? Like there's a lot to look at and talk about there. So sorry, I can get on a high horse about this and ride it a long way.
Well, no, that actually bleeds into more of the like social, emotional, culturally responsive part of the presentation too. Because when I talk about, kids seeing themselves through the pages in graphic novels, we have books like How to Talk to Your Succulent that came out, I think it came out last year. It's about a girl who lost her mother, and you visually see her pain in losing her mother because she's trying to talk to her dad about how she feels, and there are vines growing out of her back, and you can visibly see her pain. They turn from green to like this purplish, pinkish red. So you see that her pain starts turning into anger. So you visually see how hurtful losing her mom is. Or in Crumble, which is another graphic novel about losing somebody, there are panels where memories happen, and it's these hazy kind of panels where kids have to understand that, no, this is a memory and not an actual thing. Her aunt's not coming back. And so it's hard for the character, and you can see it in her face. And then there are graphic novels like Cassie in the House of Memories, where she is realizing her grandfather has dementia, and we are going through his brain, going through all of these doors of these memories where she goes and tries to find him again. And it's her journey in realizing that her grandfather will never be the same, but she can be there for him and help him through this next stage of life where things just might be confusing and hurtful. So kids can actually see that. In those graphic novels like Speechless or Living with Viola that talk about anxiety, we have Puzzled that talks about OCD. We have all these different types of books. We have A Kid Like Me, Four Eyes, Band Nerd, Hey Kiddo, that all talk about toxic family life. And then we even have graphic novels like Visitations, which is a crazy graphic memoir about the author Corey, his journey with his mother who has undiagnosed schizophrenia, and she kidnaps him and his sister, and they take a trip across the country, and it's about their survival. And it's crazy, mind-blowing graphic novel. And it's like, these stories would not be as effective as narrative nonfiction as they would be, or just a novel, as they would be told visually. Because you can see the pain, you can see the anxiety, you can see the loss all through the character's body language, through the animata, through their facial expressions. And it's just not delivered the same through the typical novel. Do I like typical novels? Oh, absolutely. But it's just, it hits harder when you can visibly see it. And with my students, I have such a diverse population where students can read a story about like A Kid Like Me, about a kid experiencing poverty, where they can either identify a student in their own classes that they know that this is happening to, or themselves. They see themselves like our windows and our mirrors. This is all what graphic novels are.
Absolutely. Oh boy, man. So many, I mean, there's so many great elements to any graphic novel, and you were just dropping knowledge about all these awesome titles too. Like there's a lot of stuff that you are mentioning that I haven't even heard of. So I love that I am going to walk away from this with a reloaded TBR because there's some, I mean, just amazing sounding stuff going on here, man. So folks should hopefully be listening to this and think about how they can bring this to their staff and get them on board, because we already know, like we already know why this is important. Do you have any suggestions or tips that people might want to keep in mind as they're bringing this to the folks that sometimes are the gatekeepers keeping students from some of the graphic novels that they might want to be engaged with.
Luckily, I have never met someone like that.
Excellent.
Everyone I usually talk to is very open and wants to learn. But I would approach it, if it's a teacher in your building, I would approach it first with, oh, I know you're teaching this lesson. Here's a graphic novel that can help your curriculum. And then just kind of like leave it on their desk or just give it to them and then have them explore on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And then see if they can figure out how to read it. And then since it's a library book, they have to come back and return it. So it's just a great way to engage with teachers. Again, my building is kind of cool because since I'm the new kid on the block, people like to come and engage with me and try to work with me. So I get a lot of teachers who are coming up with fresh new ideas, or they're like, hey, here's a unit I want to do, and I've been teaching it the same way for 15 years. Let's do something new. And I'm like, okay, great.
That's
so it's
awesome.
just using comics to kind of wiggle your way into their classroom. And it's still collaboration. It might not be you co-teaching with them, but it's still collaborating between a teacher and the library when books are involved.
Absolutely. Man, that's great. Great advice. I love that. I love the idea of just kind of like, here's something you might want to check out. And then they have to bring it back. That sort of yo-yo effect of you're pulling them back in, whether they like it or not.
And then if they read it, you can ask them how they felt about it. And they could be surprising you and be really optimistic. It'd be like, wow, that actually was different than I thought it would be. Do you have any more like this? And then you say, oh, yes, absolutely. And then you just keep feeding them books.
Let me bring you right over here. Absolutely, man. Well, speaking of books, I think we are now going to take our 90-degree turn and go into our book break.
Book break. Sweetie.
So anything you want to share, anything you want to get on people's reading radar, what do you got?
Okay, so the book that I recommended is Lunar New Year Love Story by Jean Luen Yang and Lei Yuen Pham. And it is a part of Christina and Marcia's Young Teen Lit list. I read it because it was on their Young Teen Lit list, and I love everything that they do. And my students love the book. So I was like, okay, give me that. I'm going to read it. So I read it around Valentine's Day, actually. I didn't realize that the plot takes place around Valentine's Day. We follow Valentina Tran, who loves Valentine's. She just lives with her dad, and she lost her mother. And the story talks about her going every year throughout time, giving her dad a Valentine, giving her friends Valentines. She has little Cupid St. Valentine as her imaginary friend until one day her grandmother shows up and goes, oh, your mom isn't dead. She left you and your dad. He just didn't know how to tell you. And so her world is shattered. She is Vietnamese, so she goes to church one day with her grandmother to kind of figure out what to do with her life after her dad did not tell her the truth for, I think she's like 16 or 17. So for that amount of time, she shows up to church and she sees the statue of Saint Valentine because they're in a Catholic church. And her Cupid on her shoulder then changes to this scary looking statuesque Saint Valentine. So every time he shows up, he is this depressing color motif. Most of the graphic novel is very bright and colorful. It's usually a lot of blues and a lot of reds. But when he shows up, it is gray and depressing. And so he gives her an ultimatum that her family is doomed in love, but she has 1 year to prove that she is not doomed in love. So she has at that current time, 1 year from Lunar New Year to Lunar New Year to prove that she has what it takes to have love in her life. And so she meets these two cousins, Jay and Leslie, and they are lion dancers at their Chinese cultural center. And so she learns how to lion dance, and she becomes friends with these two cousins. It's kind of like this love triangle, and there's just so much color. The themes are amazing. The cultural aspects of the book is just unmatched, and I'm not going to spoil the ending to see if Valentina figures out if she can have love in her life. So you need to read it on your own. It's very popular with my students. And the art is just amazing.
That's awesome.
That is my book recommendation.
All right. I love that. I actually ended up with a copy of that from ALA this past June. And it's in I'm going to get to this at some point, but I came back with literally I think it was 150 books. So I'm,
Yeah.
slowly whittling that down. But I'm glad to know this is going to be a real hit. That's great.
Yeah. Kate Mesner, again, is my friend, and she went to ALA and she came back and got me a signed copy of Brownstone by Samuel Tier. And that's another one of my favorite graphic novels. And so that is one of my prized possessions that I have, is a signed copy of Brownstone just for me.
Nice, man. Congrats. That's great, man. And
Thanks.
Kate Mesner on your side, you can't go wrong. Boy, I tell you. Man, well, thank you so much. I truly appreciate you taking the time to come and share this. And hopefully folks are going to see just how amazing this is, because you are really helping your students by helping your teachers. And I think that's an incredibly important thing that we can do sometimes, that we don't always take the advantage of that ability. And so I love that you're doing this for your folks. Folks should be trying to follow you online. So if they want to find you, where should they go looking?
I am active on Instagram. I have a book Instagram at Alexa D_reads. And I'm also very active on Bluesky at Alexa Dumas. So it's DOOM.bsky.social.
Awesome. Folks, follow. You're going to want to see all the awesome stuff that Alexa has going on. I'm telling you, man. Well, thank you again. I truly appreciate you taking the time and sharing this with us. It's really been awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the SLLN podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for the episode. They feature links to resources shared by our guest, as well as ways to keep in touch with them, and links to the book break titles. I'd love to hear from you. If you have feedback, a comment, an idea, a question, or something you want to share, you can email drtlovesbooks@gmail.com. That's drtlovesbooks@gmail.com. Know a librarian with something we could learn from? Let us know. Until next time, be good, be safe, and be well.